Focus on Headline. And let's take a look at what major issues are making the headlines today on Focus on Headline. For this, joining us in the studio, we have our reporters Han-Dan and Kwon-Soa. Guys, welcome back.
Good evening. And it's been a while that I'm here on a Wednesday. With me, right?
Have you guys,
nice to see you.
It's been a really long time since you two kind of...
it feels like months.
Yeah, it was really, really long time ago.
Nice haircut, by the way.
Nice bangs.
So this is how we start our Focus on Headlines, a focus on our individual hairstyles. We are going to kick things off, of course, with the continued speculations that North Korea might be conducting a nuclear test anytime soon. Song Kim this time, of course, U.S.'s top nuclear envoy, renewing such assessments while simultaneously stressing the need for diplomacy with Pyongyang. So what's the latest comments here from Song Kim?
Well, new comments coming from Washington's special representative for North Korea, Song Kim, in a special teleconference focused on the U.S. policy towards North Korea. So this was made on Tuesday, Washington time, I believe, while Song Kim himself was and is in Jakarta, it seems. Kim, in his opening statement, summed up Pyongyang's unprecedented launching of ballistic missiles, referring to the 8 ballistic missiles in a single day on Sunday, as well as 31 ballistic missiles this year, stressing it's more than the 25 fired in 2019, and it's only June now. Then he stated the U.S. assesses that North Korea is preparing to conduct a 7th nuclear test based on the North's own rhetoric used by senior officials that suggest the use of tactical nuclear weapons. If Pyongyang does indeed progresses with a nuclear test, Kim said it would face a response that comes in close coordination with allies and partners, including South Korea and Japan. He abstained from going into the specifics, though, but mentioned that there would also be a UN Security Council aspect, as nuclear tests, of course, go against multiple Security Council resolutions.
I mean, it's almost kind of a given, right? I don't think the big question is if they're going to be conducting a nuclear test. The only question is when, and it seems like the answer to that only North Korea would know. Did we get any kind of hints as though in when North Korea could potentially be conducting their 7th nuclear test?
Well, when Song Kim at that briefing was asked about a timeline, he said the North could test any time, referring to obvious preparations at its test site in Punggye-ri, but commenting on earlier speculations that it could happen later this week, including an unnamed government official's assessment it may be this Friday. He said whether that's Friday or much later on, who knows? Adding, obviously, the hope is that they will refrain from a test, as it would be, quote, terribly destabilizing to the entire region. In terms of Pyongyang's assumed preparations, an expert had more to say during an interview with VOA. David Albright, the director of the Institute for Science and International Security, said North Korea has reopened a tunnel at the Punggye-ri nuclear test site. Well, that was something we actually talked about yesterday already, as the chief of the IAEA has mentioned as well. But this expert also said that the only task left for the North is to move related devices and equipment into the shaft of the test site. He speculated the reason why South Korean and U.S. officials continue to warn of a possible imminent nuclear test could be that intelligence authorities may have already detected the arrival of such nuclear equipment. With that, the nuclear expert assumed unless there is a major diplomatic breakthrough, North Korea's nuclear test will resume soon. Now, that soon, according to Albright, could be when the North makes a political decision within the next 2 months. So that time frame may be a plausible one because another expert, a researcher at IAEA, told VOA that it usually takes some time to repair the inside of the shaft and bring in nuclear test equipment. So reopening the tunnel itself does not necessarily mean a nuclear test is fast approaching.
Yeah, because when we found out that the tunnel to the entrance of the Punggye-ri test site was open, we all thought that was kind of the signal that test is imminent here. But it's interesting. So you cited an expert again saying that unless there's this diplomatic breakthrough, right, whatever that may be, a nuclear test is likely to happen. So let's say there is this time frame of 2 months for this quote-unquote diplomatic breakthrough to come forward here. Like, what could be done to stop North Korea if there is a solution to this? Talon, let's start off with you.
You know, if I were the president of South Korea, I would consider sanctions relief. I think it's about time, and I think it's important to maintain a healthy balance between carrots and sticks, you know, when it comes to dealing with such a huge dilemma like North Korea's nuclear deadlock. But our current government, as you know, is showing absolutely no sign of offering sanctions relief or any kind of measure close to that. And so I think, quite frankly, there's not much we can do to stop North Korea's 7th nuclear test. I think what's more important to discuss at this point is South Korea's strategy after North Korea has conducted its 7th nuclear test. I think South Korea and the U.S. and perhaps maybe with Japan as well, we really need to come up with a much stronger and a much more powerful, pragmatic and practical and realistic measure that can debilitate and incapacitate North Korea's nuclear and missile programs. Because, you know, quite frankly, we all know it. You know, not a single politician or a top diplomat says this out loud, but we all know it. It's almost like the elephant in the room. North Korea, there is no way North Korea will ever give up its nuclear and missile programs. Now, having said that, I think the best we can do is come up with a much stronger way that will speak louder to North Korea to give up its nuclear programs and make it realize that resuming dialogue and returning to the negotiating table is the only option that they have, is the best option that they have.
Yeah, I mean, the problem is, though, I mean, even during the Moon administration, right, they were kind of calling for sanctions relief, but the thing is, South Koreans don't have the power to lift any of these sanctions, right? Ultimately, it's going to be Washington, the U.S. sanctions that are in place. And that's kind of like, according to some of the experts, that's kind of the reason for why there was like a slight fallout between the Moon administration and the Biden administration, because the Biden administration absolutely no sanctions relief. That's also true with the former Trump administration as well. But I wouldn't say, I can't see the Yoon administration calling for sanctions relief for the U.S. because, especially with right now, right? Like they're trying to build up this relationship with the United States. But if security is, if sanctions not one thing, I mean, there could be maybe another thing. So what would be a way to kind of stop this nuclear test from happening? What could be this potential diplomatic breakthrough?
Well, not a diplomatic breakthrough at this point, I would have to say. But recently, experts have been saying the reason for why North Korea seems to be preparing for a nuclear test right now is either they want the international attention back on North Korea, because most of the international community is currently focused on the situation in Ukraine. And another reason would be because they are just going according to their timeline in their nuclear development. So it's just a technical issue. So in the latter case, there's really nothing much we can do. They would just proceed with their nuclear test maybe in the coming weeks or maybe even in the coming days. But in the former case, if it's really attention that North Korea wants, maybe on that front, we could do something. And actually, I think on the 8th, that would be this Wednesday, the UN General Assembly is going to hold a debate solely focused on North Korea. So what I'm thinking is sanctions relief is out of the option right now, but just being stronger, condemning North Korea stronger from the UN Security Council front, and especially China and Russia should voice their opinion together with the UNSC in a stronger manner. Because once North Korea does conduct a nuclear test, even China and Russia have to denounce Pyongyang, and then they will have to join the UNSC with new, stronger sanctions. So I think if we're already stronger with, if we respond stronger towards the recent ballistic missiles, for instance, then North Korea would think, okay, the international community has more attention on us, and they might want to just postpone their nuclear test for a while.
You know what's funny is we talked about this yesterday. Russia coming out saying China needs to do more about North Korea, but I mean at the same time, Russia also vetoed the UNSC resolution, right? So so this is kind of weird, but at home yesterday, I was kind of thinking randomly
about North Korea.
Yes.
So professional.
No, like it was so random because it felt like of all the things we talked about, right? Like what do we do about North Korea? Like how do we find a solution to North Korea? And sanctions relief is kind of the best case scenario. But even with sanctions relief, to be honest with you, Tan, you're absolutely right. I don't think North Korea is ever going to be getting rid of their nuclear weapons. And I keep mentioning this on the show. It's because they saw with Russia, with the Ukraine crisis, because Russia has all those nuclear weapons. That's the only reason why the United States and its allies are not attacking Russia. Because they have this nuclear weapon. North Korea, knowing that, they're not going to get rid of it. So I was thinking, right, so if sanctions relief is not something that could be on the table, denuclearization is not on the table, what's the best bet, right? Why does North Korea want these nuclear weapons? The reason why they want these nuclear weapons and they want to stockpile the nuclear warheads is for the protection for themselves, right? So if there is a way that they could get some kind of security guarantee, right? Something on paper, I don't know what it could be, something that says, listen, we are not going to attack you guys. We are not going to invade North Korea, even though, I don't think any countries are planning to do that in the first place. Let's try to slowly, little by little, using trust that we can build. We have the security guarantee in place. The first year, I want you guys to get rid of whatever amount of nuclear warheads. The second year, whatever amount of nuclear warheads, build trust on that for it. Because I think eventually what North Korea is most afraid of is just their own safety.
Right, exactly.
I think that's... Go ahead.
I remember asking an expert about what is it that South Korea and the U.S. can do to make North Korea believe that we will guarantee its regime survival. Because like you said, that seems like the crucial point. That seems like the key to resolving this nuclear deadlock, right? And I remember the expert saying it's basically impossible to do that. It's basically because it's such a complicated issue. It's almost impossible to make North Korea believe that, to show our guarantee of its regime survival. So it's almost like mission impossible, which I guess is the very reason why the nuclear deadlock is still going on.
Yeah, absolutely. Go ahead, Song.
SJ, what you just explained to us, that just felt like a deja vu to me, because I think that's what we were trying from 2018 on. But then also the U.S. has been really mentioning guarantee of security a lot if you do this and that in stages. It's just... The talks in Hanoi that broke down. No, that's the point where everything, again, we kind of feel like we're at the beginning again.
I'm going to mention again, I think there was something in place where security guarantees were being issued to the North, right? But I still think the one person that really ruined everything...
you're going to say Bolton.
Yeah, John Bolton, really. It is John Bolton, because we talk about security guarantees and then you can't be talking about the Libyan model.
Actually, I think this is like your 100th time mentioning that name.
I'm serious. The Libyan model was, when I heard the Libyan model being mentioned by John, I said, oh my goodness, this is over. All talks are over, because that is one thing Kim Jong-un is most afraid of. What happened to Muhammad Gaddafi once they decided they're going to get rid of their nuclear weapons? What happened? A coup happened. Everything. He lost power. He lost his life eventually. And so security guarantee, they have to build this trust once again. I don't know how this is going to happen, but it has to happen. That's the only way, because no sanctions relief, nuclear weapons. Daniel Cheng says, does North Korea really have nukes, or is there... they conducted 6 nuclear weapons tests.
It's a de facto nuclear state.
Yeah. 6 nuclear tests so far. They're going after 7th. That means they have the nukes. That's why the tests are happening. It's just that they're not sending it over. And the reason why I think it's the other thing is that they're really testing is to miniaturize, the nuclear warheads, right? So that they could place it on an ICBM and then send it over to, they threatened to send it over to the United States. But I'm telling you, there is no real clear-cut answer unless someone kind of takes a step back and says, all right, look, we'll give you this. But so far, it's really a deadlock right now. In the meantime, South Korean top diplomats of South Korea, the U.S., and Japan having met in Seoul today to bolster security cooperation against North Korean threats once again. Tan, give us the details of this.
Right. Vice Foreign Minister Cho Hyun-dong and his U.S. and Japanese counterparts Wendy Sherman and Takeo Mori agreed to strengthen trilateral security cooperation against North Korea threats, assessing that North Korea's nuclear and missile programs are advancing. They vowed to further develop trilateral security cooperation to deter North Korea threats. Much attention is now being focused on what specific measures will fall follow after today's agreement to further boost the trilateral military ties that were strained due to soured Seoul-Tokyo relations. In a joint statement, the three sides strongly condemned Pyongyang's behavior as unlawful acts, and the U.S. reaffirmed its commitment to defend South Korea and Japan through extended deterrence. Sherman, through the statement, reiterated that the three countries' common goal remains the complete denuclearization of the Korean Peninsula and urged North Korea to stop provocative acts and resume dialogue. And much attention is also being drawn to the changing Seoul-Tokyo relations with the launch of the Yoon administration, which is actively seeking to improve the sour relations. If you remember, the last time the vice foreign ministers of the three nations met, the atmosphere was quite different, with Japan calling off the press conference, filing a complaint against the visit to Dokdo by South Korea's chief of the National Police Agency. But things appeared to warm up with Japanese Foreign Minister Yoshimasa Hayashi attending President Yoon's inauguration ceremony and followed by a series of meetings between top South Korean and Japanese officials.
And also in response to North Korea's threats, the South Korean government has once again made it clear it will beef up Korea's three-pillar defense system. So what exactly did the officials say?
Right. So the ruling People Power Party and the government and the presidential office jointly pledged to respond sternly to North Korea's repeated provocations today. And more specifically, Shin In-ho, the second deputy national security advisor, reiterated that the military will beef up Korea's three-pillar defense system that will be the center of incapacitating North Korea's missiles and nuclear weapons. The three-pillar system refers to South Korea's strategy to boost defense capabilities against North Korea's missile and nuclear threats through three pillars: the Kill Chain Preemptive Strike System, the Korean Air and Missile Defense System, the KAMD, and the Korea Massive Punishment and Retaliation System, the KMPR system. Shin went on to say that the Yoon administration will take a different approach from the previous administration, which he claimed did not take practical action after North Korea's provocations. He said the new government will devise fundamental measures to debilitate North Korea's nuclear threats and bolster execution capabilities of Washington's pledge of extended deterrence. Foreign Minister Park Jin echoed his claim, saying North Korea's provocations will only lead to strengthened deterrence of South Korea-U.S. alliance.
Got a couple of messages from our listeners. Noradine, who, by the way, watches and listens to everything on Arirang all throughout the day. He says, SJ is right. The only reason Saddam Hussein and Muammar Gaddafi are not still in power is because they didn't have nukes. Kim knows this. The U.S. claims Kim has 65 warheads. Yeah, it was kind of interesting with the Iraq war because the Bush administration was saying that Iraq has WMDs, but they didn't. There was actually no evidence that they had any nuclear weapons. And that was the excuse that they used to go into Iraq. Daniel Cheng also says, was there any response from the North when Korea and U.S. retaliated with 8 missiles? No, because there wasn't even a report on them firing 8 ballistic missiles. In fact, they've been kind of mum on their state media as well. So kind of interesting. We're going to move on and shift over to the economy this time. The World Bank having lowered its global growth forecast to 2.9% for 2022, even warning of a stagflation that's very reminiscent of the 1970s. So let's get the details of this.
Yes, the World Bank, in its Global Economic Prospects report on Tuesday, slashed its annual global growth forecast to 2.9% this year from 5.7% last year. It's also 1.2 percentage points lower than a prediction of 4.1% made in January. And the World Bank forecasts 2023 through 2024 to be at a similar level when it comes to that growth. And this as inflation stays above target in most countries and weak growth coupled with rising prices may continue for years as many countries are still struggling from the aftermath of the pandemic, while Russia's invasion of Ukraine is the main culprit behind the surge in commodity prices. World Bank President David Malpass warned for many economies recession will be difficult to avoid, with the bank mentioning stagflation risks similar to the 1970s. So what is a 1970s-style stagflation then? The World Bank explained that the current juncture we are in is reminiscent of the 1970s in 3 key aspects. And let me just read out the statement by the World Bank. Okay. Persistent supply disturbances fueling inflation, preceded by a protracted period of highly accommodative monetary policy in major advanced economies, prospects for weakening growth, and vulnerabilities that emerging market and developing economies face with respect to the monetary policy tightening that will be needed to rein in inflation. And what the recovery from the 1970s stagflation required was a period of intense increases in interest rates in advanced economies, and that resulted in financial crises in emerging market and developing economies. And domestically, in the meantime, we learned that South Korea's economy grew 0.6% in the first quarter at a slightly slower pace than expected. According to preliminary data from the Bank of Korea this Tuesday, weakened investment and spending was attributed to the mere growth of 0.6% in the January to March period compared to the 3 months before. It was down from 0.7% growth, an estimate back in April. Compared to last year, though, the economy expanded 3% in the first quarter. Exports remained strong, growing 3.6% on quarter, but despite robust outbound shipments, there remains uncertainty, again, from inflation, global supply chain disruptions, so what everyone in the world is dealing with.
Yeah, not to mention soaring energy prices, right? Speaking of which, Korea's truckers union staging a nationwide strike demanding a more stable wage system. Did we see any kind of major disruptions in the cargo movements because of this strike?
Well, according to the Transport Ministry, no. It said although there were big and small disruptions at major ports and logistics hubs here and there, the overall impact was not that significant. The ministry said because the majority of the consignors and transport companies have taken prior measures against the large-scale strike, there were no major logistical disruptions. It added the country's major ports operated as usual, but the walkout blocked or slowed down cargo movements for some companies, with Hyundai Steel being blocked from discharging 9,000 tons of steel from its factory in Pohang, and cement supply to the capital region came to a complete stop as the truckers union blocked the entrance of a major cement supply hub in Uiwang, Gyeonggi province. And according to the Korean Federation of Trade Unions, some 9,000 union members staged the large-scale protests across 14 points nationwide today, including those in Busan, Incheon, and South Gyeongsang province. So about 40% of the 22,000 union members took part on the first day of the strike, which began as of midnight Wednesday. And what they're demanding is an extension of a freight rate system that guarantees basic wages for truck drivers to cope with surging fuel costs. The system, introduced for a 3-year run in 2020, is set to expire at the end of this year. So like the Transport Ministry has said, we may not see a major disruption within a day or two, but we are expected to see much larger damages if the strike goes on long term. The strike comes at a time when global supply chains are struggling to recover from Russia's invasion of Ukraine and continuing COVID-19 lockdowns in China. Although not all of the nation's drivers took part today, the rallies look enough to threaten to slow South Korea's exports from steel to plastics and consumer goods if they go on for weeks.
You know what's interesting? Again, one of the random things that I do at night, watch YouTube.
Except for thinking about North Korea.
Thinking about North Korea also.
How to resolve the nuclear deadlock.
Yes.
Before you go to bed.
Yeah. As a non-diplomat, it's just the host of Korea now, how to resolve this deadlock, right? I also watch a YouTube video on the life of truckers here in Korea. Mm-hmm. I mean, it's tough for them because they make something like $12,000 a month, right? But because of the fuel, because of there's a lot of repair work that goes on with trucks, because I mean they're putting in tons of like dirt and rocks and things like that, and eventually what they make at 6 days a week for about like 12 hours, something like that. They go very early because they have to wait online. They end up making about $2,000 a month. 2,000. So I mean, when you talk about the fuel prices going up, they're gonna obviously make less, and that's the reason why they're asking for more of the basic wage system here. And so I'm actually not surprised that there is a strike in regards to this, but also part of efforts to mitigate possible negative impact and stop further obstructions, that the police arrested 15 unionized truckers. So tell us more about this as well, Tan.
More than a dozen unionized truckers on a general strike were apprehended today for allegedly obstructing business operations of a plant in Incheon 15 members of the Cargo Truckers Solidarity under the wing of the Korean Federation of Trade Unions were taken into custody on charges of blocking cargo trucks from entering the plant operated by the country's leading beverage company, Haight Chillo Corporation, in the city 80 kilometers southeast of Seoul. The government has said that it'll guarantee workers' rights to stage protests, but warned obstructions of logistical transportations will be met with strict punishment.
In the meantime, let's go on over to some updates on COVID-19 frontier. It's a Wednesday. We usually, when it comes to Wednesdays, we see a huge spike in cases. But today's figure is quite interesting, although I still have to say maybe with the long extended holiday, maybe that was the reason why. But nevertheless, as well, let's get some numbers that came in earlier today.
Well, the number did definitely surge compared to yesterday, as daily cases have surpassed 10,000 this Wednesday. 13,358 infections were tallied as of 12 a.m. So more than double the figure of Tuesday when we had a little over 6,000 cases. But yes, SJ, as you mentioned, the weekend and also the Memorial Day probably played a factor due to fewer testings. And also what's notable is that on a weekly basis, infections are continuing their declining trend, because last Wednesday we had over almost 16,000 cases, and 2 weeks ago close to 24,000. So we are continuing to see this downward trend. And the average number of daily cases in the past week has now dropped to below 10,000, standing at 9,839. 59 cases this Wednesday were from abroad and 13,299 domestic cases. And I haven't been checking the numbers every day these days, but 59 cases from abroad seems more than
what it used to be before,
So the overall number has been going down, but the number of import cases is going up, so that's kind of a concern because we have been lifting the travel, many of the restrictions at the airport, for instance. Meanwhile, what's really good news is that the daily death toll is going down. 6 fatalities have been reported in the span of 24 hours, and that's the lowest in around 8 months. 114 people remain in severe or critical condition. That's similar to what we've been seeing recently. Now, along with the improving situation, as I said, starting this Wednesday, as we forecasted yesterday, 7-day isolation rules for international arrivals have been lifted. And now that's COVID. In the meantime, monkeypox has been designated a second level of contagious disease of a 4-tier scheme starting this Wednesday, so same as COVID. And this is in a bid to prevent an influx of this virus, with anyone detected with monkeypox having to go into immediate quarantine. And I think you're going to talk about this issue later.
Yeah, we're going to be connecting with Dr. David Kwok on the concerns over monkeypox here. But the international arrivals, that's kind of a concern, because I think I read earlier this morning that there was like 35 additional Omicron variants that's popped up here in the country. So we know that with the BA4 and the BA5, you can get reinfected, even if we've already been infected with the Omicron BA1. So whether or not that's going to change things is something I guess we'll have to watch. Our final piece of story that we're going to be covering, it caught me really off guard today. I almost had to do a second take. I had to ask our writers whether or not this was for real, because I actually missed this. South Korea's oldest TV presenter, in fact, recently he had received a Guinness record for the oldest MC, living MC, at the age of 95. He is well known, of course, for his show 전국 노래자랑, which I'm sure all of us are very much familiar with. It is translated as a national singing contest. This is, of course, broadcasted on KBS. He's passed away at the age of 95. So tell us more about this.
Well, if you're a South Korean, or if you've lived in South Korea long enough, you would definitely know who he was. Song Hae was one of Korea's favorite, most beloved TV presenter of all time, and it was just so natural to see the singing contest every weekend morning on TV, right? With Song hosting the show in his own style that was very warm, grandfather-like, and very down-to-earth. According to the police and hospital officials, he passed away this morning at his residence in Gangnam. His daughter went looking for him at his home because he didn't show up to an appointment with her, and he was found lying on the floor. He had been admitted to and released from a hospital for medical treatment several times this year, and he also had tested positive for COVID-19 in March. Now, born in 1927 in Hwanghae province in North Korea, Song crossed the inter-Korean border to the south during the Korean War from 1950 to 1953. He started his entertainment career in his 20s, first beginning his career as a singer, but gained wide popularity and recognition through the singing contest program launched in 1980. He continued to host the show for more than 34 years until very recently, and he was listed as, like you mentioned, the world's oldest TV music talent show host on the Guinness World Record. He had 3 children, but his son died of a car accident in 1994, and he was survived by 2 daughters. His wife passed away in 2018.
Again, for our listeners out there, you just saw the picture of the late Song Hae. And I'm sure we all grew up, I honestly, I haven't watched the recent episodes of 전국 노래자랑, but this is definitely a show that I grew up with, something that my mom always talks about because she was always saying that when, morning sickness was really bad when she was pregnant with me, the only thing that got her to forget about her morning sickness was watching this every Sundays. And so, it's been a huge part of, I think, everyone's life. So, what about you guys? I know you lived abroad as well, but definitely, this is a show that we've all been very familiar with.
Yes, I think it really feels surreal that he passed away. And MC Song Hae was always there, and 전국 노래장 was always there for me because Song Hae has been hosting the show since 1988, and I was born in 1988. So really, he was always there, and it really felt like he will still continue for at least until he was over 100 years old because he kind of symbolized health.
Right. He was
very
healthy.
And I did get to see a documentary recently about Song Hae. And in that documentary, you could see that he did have health issues, but he tried to remain strong. And it kind of felt that we will really see him for more years. And yeah, I was really sad when I heard that news. And to be honest, I think the show, the 전국 노래자랑 show, has not yet revealed on who could be the next MC. But I don't want the show to continue.
Yeah.
I think
without him.
That show just was Song Hae's show. So
what's interesting is every Thursdays we have a segment Back to the Culture with Kim Young-dae, our music critic, and a couple of weeks ago we actually did a special on 전국 노래자랑, and we were talking about, I don't know if you guys know this, but 전국 노래자랑 has been around even before Song Hae started as MC. He wasn't the first MC. But when we think of 전국 노래자랑, who do we think of? Song Hae. And that was kind of, it was his show, right? And so a lot of people are saying, listen, instead of finding a new MC, I think the best would be, there's 2 options. Call it Song Hae's 전국 노래자랑 and have another MC, or just get rid of the show completely. But Tan, what about yourself? Just your memories of him and the show in itself.
Well, like you said, I grew up watching the show. It was just so natural to see him every Sunday morning. He just gave us so much joy and laughter. And to me, personally, his death also feels like a big chapter of my younger days also passed away with him.
Yeah.
If you know what I mean. It made me feel like I'm also aging. So I'm deeply saddened by his death. And I saw him in person a couple of times because I moved to a different apartment now, but my old home, it was just a block away from his. And so I came across him a couple of times. And when I said, hello, and 송혜 씨, 송혜 할아버지, hello. I said, he was like just such a nice grandfather figure. He's actually like the grandfather of Korea, right?
Yeah.
So he was like such a nice, sweet man. So yeah, I'm deeply saddened and deeply heartbroken.
Yeah, go ahead.
And also the reason for why Song Hae was the one who has been hosting 전국 노래자랑 for more than 30 years is because he really was good at communicating with the people. And
that was the best. That was the best part.
Yeah. And he would eat with the people in the regions. And so I think his down-to-earth attitude was really what people liked about him and wanted him to continue the show for that long time. And I also saw an article recently that says, I don't know how to say this in English, brand image, out of the MCs, the 국민 MCs, the
유재석 and the
and Yoo Jae-seok was the first place, but Song Hae was the second. And that means for these many years, he still was a 국민 MC, and he will be
Right.
remembered as that in Korea.
It's funny how you talk about how he would just go to different regions and just eat with everyone else. And, there was a lot of pictures on the internet. They said if you're in Seoul and you want to meet Song Hae, all you have to do is get on the 3 line, because he would basically take the 3 line. And he's randomly sitting there with everyone else, no mask to hide his face. And I think the reason why everyone loved him is because he was so down to earth.
Right.
Yang Gurum says, my parents always watched 전국 노래자랑 after we came back from church every Sundays. It's not just a simple show. It's part of my history.
Yeah.
I think it was part of all of our lives.
Yeah, we all feel the same way.
And again, condolences. And I don't think, it's been an incredible career that he's had. And it's really unfortunate that we had to report on his death. Guys, thank you very much for coming in today with your reports and your insights on some of these issues. Stay safe, and we'll see you guys again.
See
Thank you.
You can listen to Korea Now with me, SJ Lee, by downloading the Arirang Radio application, or tune in online by visiting www.arirangradio.com. So make sure you tune in Mondays through Fridays, 6 p.m. to 8 p.m. Korea time.